Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Alex Fordham, editor, managing director of the Metal Packager, and it gives me great pleasure today to bring another Talk in a Can segment from the Metal Packager. Be sure to like our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. It gives me great pleasure today to have a conversation with PPG Packaging Coatings. So, Meghan, welcome. Thanks very much, and looking forward to an interesting conversation about the latest developments in the packaging coating space.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Really excited to be here today.
No problem at all. And just for perhaps our audience here who aren't quite as well acquainted with PPG Packaging Coatings and yourself, just a brief overview before we begin, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. My name is Meghan Barrera, and I lead the Global Strategic Marketing Group for PPG Packaging Coatings. I've been with PPG about over 20 years in a number of different businesses, from our marine business to our auto collision business and now into packaging. So it's very exciting, I will say, as I joined the business last year to see my child when I got home from work one day drinking a can of ginger ale. And my first point was, wow, that's too much sugar for late at night. But my second thought was, I'm so excited to be in a business that is truly impacting the day-to-day lives of all, not just my own family, but all of our families here. So it's very great to be here. And PPG Packaging Coatings participates in all parts of the metal packaging business, from beverages to personal care to food, and really driving innovation across all of those areas.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And it's one of those things where you never quite look at a can in the same way again, do you?
Absolutely not. My grocery shopping is very different every week now.
Absolutely. So we're here for Metpack 2026. Just your kind of key takeaways from the show. Certainly, from my perspective, it seems like the industry seems to be lots of positivity, vibrancy during the week. So yeah, your key takeaways from the week.
Yeah, absolutely the same. This is the place to be for metal packaging, and it's very interesting to see all parts of the value chain here to support the customers. So I felt a lot of excitement through the week. Definitely all parts of the world were represented here, and I think people are excited to move forward looking at new innovations every day.
You mentioned about new innovations. Perhaps just a brief overview of some of the innovations that you've been showcasing. I know in your role you cover PPG packaging coatings throughout the whole supply chain.
Yeah, it's been an exciting week to be able to talk about our innovations. Over the last year, we've released new products across multiple parts of the segment. So if you look at the food area, we released the first PVC-NI one component solution within the US focused on pet food, PPG's NutriShield 7590. If you looked at the easy open end space, we've launched our 2489 and our new external 5018 for ends, BPA&I solutions, as well as a beer weight waterborne 6720 as well on ends. And then if you looked at our HOBA products, we also released another one for monoblock aerosols and in the personal care space for water, wine, and other beverages too.
That's fantastic. In terms of key takeaways from this week, of what's been the feedback from your customers in terms of your new innovations, and is there kind of a twofold question here? That's kind of the key takeaways, and then has there been any comments or notes from your customer to say, "Oh, I didn't think of that," and perhaps there's some feedback for PPG to consider moving forward as well. It's always getting that feedback from your customers, I suppose, is the acid test, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you looked at our booth this week, our real focus was on partnering with our customers. And if you saw the clouds that were out there, it was all about what are the possibilities for our customers and focused on our partnerships and what we can do for them. And if you looked at our innovations and talking about those, there's a big focus for a lot of the can makers right now, particularly in Europe, on the BPA&I conversions. And so many of our innovations right now have focused on doing that, but it's not necessarily just focused on removing materials of concern or meeting regulations. It's about doing that while we're also driving efficiency in their operations and focus on what we can do to help make them more productive and successful. So the feedback from a lot of our customers this week has been staying in front of regulations, understanding what's happening in other parts of the world outside of Europe, and how are we helping them be ready in front of those regulations.
So in terms of the BPA NI coatings, I mean, is the message getting resonating with not necessarily with the customers, but with consumers now? In terms of has the debate gone from this is the future to now this is essentially in terms of the coatings industry, this is this is the future moving forwards. Is that what you're seeing?
I feel like consumers were actually driving a lot of the early discussions on this, and regulations are really driving some of the market adoption across the world. But if you look at our can makers, you look at the brands, the ultimate customer at the end of this is the consumer.
Yeah.
So everything that we're doing is focused on what does the consumer need. And I think it's not even just on a regulatory standpoint. What's interesting on our innovations, and particularly in the coating space here, is that we're enabling our brands to be able to do something different because the consumer trends, when you look at what's in a can, it's not just water anymore. It's not pop, it's not beer. It's really changing the types of beverages that can be packed in there. And so consumers are driving what innovations have to happen and how do we help brands stand out on a shelf. And those are things that coatings can really help them do.
And just in terms of, you mentioned trends there, it's always good to get advice from industry experts such as yourself because you've got your finger on the pulse. What trends are we seeing in the beverage can space at the moment? Not necessarily the beverage can space, but in the metal cap packaging space that really excite you. I know the pet food side of things sounds a really it's always been seen as quite a flat market, but it seems like there's lots of potential for growth there. So that's something I'm quite interested to pick your brains about. But is there any other trends that you're seeing that are really exciting in this space at the moment?
Yes, I was gonna say certainly pet food, we see growth there. And, you look at that, it's not just within the US where I live, but talk to other colleagues, we're seeing that trend around the world. Everyone loves their pets. So looking at that, but especially in the beverage space, we're seeing a change of what we would call harder to hold beverages. So things that are functional beverages, ready to drink, more alcoholic or mixed beverages in a can that weren't necessarily there in the past.
Mm. No, that's great to it's great to hear. No, I know we've been talking about some positivity here at the moment, but at the moment, I think walking the floor, it's been lots of talk about supply chain issues. I know for consumers, cost of living pressures, and that cost having to be passed on to consumers. Not to put a negative spin on things here, but in terms of, just want to quiz you on what you finding at PPG. Has it been a challenge in terms of the geopolitical pressures at the moment, in terms of supply chain pressures, and how you guys at PPG looking to adapt as a result?
No, I mean, I think certainly the geopolitical pressures are impacting every one of us that are here today, and that has multiple different impacts that we all are having to manage through. And I think that's where it's really important for all of us here. And what we really try to do at PPG is partner with our customers and make sure that we have that two-way communication so we understand what's important to them and how we can adapt and work on these
Yeah.
things together. But as you look at that, our customers are really impacted by costs here. And so those aren't necessarily just in the coding space. So as we're working with them and we talk even about our innovations and how we support them day to day, it's how do we make sure that their operations are most efficient? So we're helping them be most cost competitive. And that's what's really important, I think, right now as we manage through some of these turbulent times that we can't control. We help to focus with our customers of what we can control together and make that the best that it can be.
And in terms of challenges for the industry, is that the most significant concern at the moment, or is there any other factors at play that in your role here? Is there anything that you think the industry needs to be aware of, or kind of warning signs that we need to just be mindful of and take note of moving forward in the next couple of years?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think very much short term, I think that's something that we're all trying to manage through. But I think bigger picture, what we need to really think about for the industry is what are regulations looking at around the world. And so what we're focusing on is how do we help our customers be in front of those and be prepared for those so it's as smooth of a process as possible. But as we look at this, consumers aren't only looking at regulations, they're thinking about sustainability and what's the world going to look like. So a focus not just for our customers right now, but for ourselves in the future is how can we help make their operations more sustainable? And as we look at that, there's a lot that we can look at from an alternative cure standpoint and other aspects of our coatings. And so that's something that we're helping to talk about with our customers and our own innovations internally.
You mentioned sustainability there. Is certainly in the last few years, sustainability has been front and center of messaging globally, particularly for corporate organisations. I know in terms of governmental pressures, changes in that regard, I've seen a short reining back a little bit in terms of sustainability being a key message. Is sustainability still very much front and center of your ethos at PPG, particularly PPG Packaging Coatings?
Absolutely. Sustainability is front and center. For PPG, it's been a core corporate value for many, many years. We're actually the first in the US to have our scope 1 through 3 emissions qualified from the organization. So this is something that's core value for us, and it's very consistent with what we see from our customers, and it's driving what the brands have asked for, which is then driving what the can makers ask for and coming back to us too. So as we look at this is not just looking at regulations, but it's how do we make operations more efficient? How are we saving water, gas, emissions, um, in particular at our customer site?
So it's efficiency seems to be the name of the
Efficiency
game.
is the name of the game. And actually, as we were at our booth this week, we had a informal poll of what's most important to you right now, and we found sustainability was the number one so far from what people had said was what they're looking at as sustainable operations in the
That's
future.
that's really interesting. I think that sustainability is still important. Do you think that's the case with consumer choice as well? Because yeah, young people, and perhaps we could get onto obviously the aluminium bottle side of things as well. Do you think people are certainly in the personal care market, etc.? Do you think consumers, particularly young people, are prepared to pay a premium for a product because there's that school of thought, isn't there, with cost of living pressures? We've seen inflationary pressures, cost of everything increasing now, and does that put pressure on consumption habits, or do you think people are still prepared to pay that little bit extra for quality?
Um, it's an interesting question because I think whenever you look at this, it's always that balance of its cost pressures and sustainability. And I think most people don't want to have to make that
Yeah.
decision. So in whenever you look at inflation, people are trying to figure out what's best for them. And that's where as we take this on as a coating supplier, we want to be able to do both for people. So as we think about our new product innovation, I think that's front and center. You have to be able to have a sustainable operation or a sustainable solution, but it can't cost a premium um, because that's a challenge for people. So you're trying to look at margins, you're trying to look at costs, and you have to be able to do both for it to be successful.
I just want to move things on to the regulation side of things. I mean, if brand owners, it must be overwhelming with the amount of legislation change that we've seen during the past few years. So, is there any bits of advice for brand owners about how they can navigate those challenges? Because this is from an outsider looking in, and the challenge for ourselves at the Metpack packages we cover raw materials to end users, so we have to have a little bit of knowledge about everything. So, when I see the regulatory information, it certainly seems overwhelming from my side. So particularly, I'd imagine for brand owners, it must be a pretty similar thing. So how, it's kind of a loaded question here, but how are you helping brand owners there, and what kind of key messages should they be considering at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's really overwhelming when you look at the number of regulatory changes that are happening. And as we looked at the past several years, things were more steady. There were new regulations, but now it feels like it's almost a tsunami of regulations that are coming in all parts of the world, not just one region. And when you look at the US, there's certainly several states that are proposing different regulations. And so that's where it's really important for brand owners or can makers to work with their partners and utilize their regulatory expertise to be able to stay in front of these. And that's something that we really focus on. We have a very strong regulatory team that are in front of these that are working with people every single day that can explain not just what's happening, but how we have solutions. And then how do we actually make sure that we're able to convert people to be able to meet those regulations in a smooth way. As we talk about launching new products, we have a smart launch process to make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's to be able to make sure that that becomes very seamless as we go forward. So, from the start of a regulation proposal, we can help explain that to folks, whether it's the brands or the can makers. What does this actually mean for the regulation? And to then, if we have to change it, can convert to a new solution, making sure that it's seamless across the board.
That's great. And it just, I know we mentioned about trends earlier, but I'm kind of keen to deep dive a little bit more into some of the other trends that we're seeing. I mean, particularly in the aluminium bottle side of things, in terms of some of the solutions that you provide. So a bit of information in that space, because I think that's one of the really exciting areas in the in certainly in the beverage space at the moment. Is the
Mhm.
we talked about kind of the personalization and that premium side of things. Yeah, you've got some exciting developments in the aluminium bottle space as well. So if you can share some of those, that'd be really interesting.
Now, I mean, as you look at the bottle space, there are products that I mean are really changing. The trends are changing inside the can and outside the can. So you look at inside, it's all about how are you able to hold different types of beverages because as the brands want to be able to differentiate. They're trying to do something different to apply to appeal to different consumer tastes. And then certainly as you're on the can, on the outside of the can, how do you differentiate yourself on the shelf? And so that's where we have our iSense coatings, whether you're talking about a tactile finish, satin matte, you can really make a difference of what that looks like on the shelf there for sure.
That's great. That's great. And just in terms of, I always like these podcasts to learn. It's always important to learn about obviously what's happening at PPG Packaging Coatings, etc. But just find a little bit more about Megan yourself as well, and your kind of what drives you, what your passion for the industry certainly shines through in this conversation. Like your ambitions, obviously being a woman in a predominantly male industry. I know things seem to be changing, but that must be something that you're very, very proud of. And it seems that PPG are able to support you in your career path as well. So sorry, I don't want to make things too personal because they're difficult questions
Um,
to answer, but I think it's certainly trends that we're seeing, and things are changing slowly in terms of encouraging more women into the business. But yeah, just want to press you on that if that's okay. And apologies in advance asking you that.
No, no problem at all. Happy to talk about it. And PPG has been an absolutely fantastic place to work and a supporter of a woman in this industry. And I feel that the same way as packaging has been very welcoming to me as I've come in here too. And I think my approach from my whole career, and I find it here too, is when you talk to people about what's happening, what's their problems, and how do you work together to solve them. I don't think it matters if you're a man or a woman. It's how do you work together to make the best solution possible. And I found people throughout this industry and certainly others that I've worked in PPG to be the same way. And what I love about this industry and is something that I've also always felt comfortable with in my whole career is finding ways to partner with people to work together, build relationships, and that really makes it's not just hey, day to day, what are we working on right now? But how do we build this relationship to understand how it's a long term solution together? And I think that's core to how this industry works. So it's very consistent with my personal values of that partnership and it's that bonding together, not just short term but long term of how do we make something the best for two people involved.
No, that's fantastic. And just to kind of conclude things here in terms of your overall takeaways from this week, we're really interested to hear your summary of first the show, but also
Mhm.
for the future in terms of perhaps we'll talk about the metal packaging first, then we can get into the obviously the packaging coating side. But your summary of where we're at as an industry and where you see things moving forward as well. It'd be really good to get your key takeaway thoughts.
Sure. I mean, so I've seen a lot of energy throughout the show this week. So really positive energy. I think a focus has been in particular at the current state of looking at BPNI conversions throughout the European area, and then saying how's that going to extend globally. For sure is one trend, but I think there's also been a lot focused on what does the future look like for operations standpoint, certainly from a sustainability perspective, but also how are we driving efficiencies? And that's hitting can makers, that's hitting brands. And so I think everyone's looking not just at 2026, but what is the future looking at 2028, 2030 and beyond.